The scent of freshly cut grass was Sarah's favorite welcome home. It was late May, and the sun, a benevolent orb, cast long, golden shadows across her meticulously tended lawn. Just 3 months ago, this house, with its sprawling backyard and ancient oak, had been a dream materialized. A true slice of suburban heaven after years of cramped city living. She'd spent countless weekends coaxing life back into the flower beds and battling the stubborn dandelions that had claimed residency. Her reward was this: a vibrant, emerald expanse, framed by a charming picket fence she'd personally whitewashed. She hummed a forgotten tune as she knelt, trowel in hand, transplanting a cluster of budding petunias near the fence line. Her hands, dusted with rich earth, moved with practiced ease. A sudden, piercing shriek sliced through the peaceful afternoon, startling a robin from its perch. "What do you think you're doing?" Sarah froze, her spine stiffening. She knew that voice. Janice Thorne. Or, as the neighborhood whispers affectionately and accurately, dubbed her, Karen. Janice lived 2 houses down, a formidable woman with a perpetually pursed mouth and a gaze that could curdle milk. Since Sarah had moved in, Janice had offered a steady stream of unsolicited advice, thinly veiled criticisms, and territorial pronouncements delivered from her perfectly manicured porch. Sarah had learned to smile, nod, and politely retreat. Slowly, Sarah straightened, brushing dirt from her jeans. Janice stood at the edge of her own lawn, hands planted firmly on her hips, her florid face a mask of outrage. Her bright pink visor, usually a source of mild amusement for Sarah, seemed to vibrate with indignation. "I'm planting petunias, Janice," Sarah replied, trying to keep her tone even, despite the sudden tremor in her stomach. "They're going to look lovely here." "Not there, you're not." Janice's voice escalated, sharp enough to cut glass. "That's my property. You're encroaching." Again. Sarah blinked. "Your property?" "Janice, this is clearly my side of the fence. This fence has been here for decades. The surveyor confirmed it when I bought the house." She gestured vaguely towards the property marker, barely visible beneath a creeping vine. Janice scoffed, a sound of pure disdain. "Your surveyor is an idiot. Or perhaps you are. That fence is wrong. It's always been wrong. My mother, bless her soul, always said that oak tree was hers, and everything to its west, including this entire strip you're currently desecrating, belongs to me." She stabbed a finger towards the disputed strip of land, her nail a perfectly manicured, aggressive red. Sarah felt a surge of heat rise to her cheek. She had been through so much to get this house. It represented stability, peace, a fresh start. She wasn't about to let a territorial neighbor, no matter how intimidating, strong-arm her out of her own yard. "Janice, the property lines are clearly defined on my deed and the plat map. The fence is precisely where it should be. The oak tree is fully on my land." "Lies. All lies." Janice's voice reached a crescendo, drawing the attention of a curious dog walker across the street. "You think you can just move into my neighborhood and steal my land? I've lived here for 37 years. I know every blade of grass, every inch of this street. You newcomers always think you can just waltz in and change everything." Sarah sighed, pushing her hair back. This was rapidly escalating beyond a polite disagreement. "I haven't changed anything, Janice. I bought this property as it was surveyed. If you believe there's a mistake, perhaps you should check your own deed." "My deed is fine," Janice shrieked, her face turning an alarming shade of crimson. "It's your deed that's wrong. Or you're just deliberately ignoring it. You're a thief. A land thief." A knot tightened in Sarah's stomach. This wasn't just about petunias anymore. This was a direct assault on her peace, her home, her sanity. "Janice, please. This is getting ridiculous. I assure you, I have no intention of stealing anyone's property. Everything I've done has been within my legal boundaries." "Ridiculous, you say?" Janice's eyes narrowed, gleaming with a chilling vindictiveness. "We'll see about ridiculous. I have a lawyer, you know. A very good lawyer. And I'm not afraid to use him. This isn't over. Not by a long shot. I'm calling the police. Sarah stared, disbelief warring with a rising sense of dread. The police? Over a few feet of grass? Janice, that's completely unnecessary. We can look at the surveys together. There's no need to involve law enforcement. Oh, there's every need, Janice declared, already reaching for her phone, her thumb poised over the screen. You think you can just get away with this? Not on my watch, young lady. This is a criminal act. Grand theft law. Sarah watched, stunned, as Janice, with an air of theatrical righteousness, began speaking into her phone. Sarah held the thick, embossed envelope like a shield. The official seal, a symbol of irrefutable truth, felt weighty in her grasp. Janice, whose earlier bluster had inflated her to twice her size, seemed to deflate slightly at the sight of the documents. Her perfectly coiffed hair, usually impervious to the elements, seemed to sag a little, her confident smirk twitching. Officer Miller, the taller, sterner of the two, gestured for Sarah to hand over the paperwork. "All right, Miss Thompson, let's take a look," he said, his voice now carrying a hint of professional curiosity rather than detached observation. Officer Davis, the younger officer, leaned in, her gaze moving between the documents and Janice, a flicker of something akin to skepticism in her eyes. Sarah carefully extracted the deed, the plat map, and the recent survey report, neatly bound with a paperclip, from the envelope. She presented them to Officer Miller. His fingers, calloused and strong, carefully unfolded the large, detailed plat map first. The vibrant green lines, the clearly marked boundaries, the precise dimensions of each lot, it was all there, undeniable. His eyes, sharp and practiced, scanned the document, moving from the street names to the lot numbers, then tracing the boundary between Sarah's property and Janice's. Janice, unable to contain herself, edged closer. "That's fake. She probably printed it herself. You can't trust anything from these new people." Her voice was shrill, lacking the earlier authoritative ring, now bordering on desperation. "Ma'am, please step back," Officer Davis interjected, her tone firm. "These are official county documents. We'll verify them." Officer Miller grunted, his gaze still fixed on the map. He then picked up the deed, his thumb gently pressing against the embossed seal. The legal description, painstakingly detailed, confirmed what Sarah already knew. He compared it to the plat map, his brow furrowed in concentration. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, punctuated only by the distant chirping of crickets and the hushed murmurs of the now sizable crowd of neighbors gathered across the street. Finally, Officer Miller looked up, his expression unchanging, but a definitive air now settled around him. He turned to Janice. "Ms. Thorne, according to these documents, the fence line is indeed accurate. Miss Thompson's property extends precisely to this boundary, as shown on this plat map and outlined in her deed. The oak tree is fully within her property." He pointed a steady finger at the line on the map, then towards the actual fence. Janice gasped, a sound of theatrical shock. "That's impossible. You're wrong. All of you. My mother," she always said. "Ma'am, with all due respect to your mother, official county records supersede anecdotal family history," Officer Davis stated, her voice devoid of emotion, a professional politeness that cut deeper than any insult. "These documents are legally binding." Janice's face, already flushed, turned a deeper, mottled red. Her mouth opened and closed several times, as if she were a fish out of water, struggling for air. The carefully constructed edifice of her outrage began to crumble. But it's my land. It's always been my land. She just moved here. She can't do this." Her voice cracked, bordering on a wail. Officer Miller held up the deed, displaying it clearly. "Ms. Thorne, Miss Thompson legally purchased this property with these boundaries. There is no indication of any encroachment on your land. This is a civil matter of property lines, and based on the documents presented, Miss Thompson is entirely within her rights." He then handed the documents back to Sarah. The paper felt cool and comforting in her hands. The relief that washed over her was so profound it almost made her knees buckle. She had done it. She had stood her ground. Janice, however, was not one to admit defeat gracefully. Her eyes, filled with a desperate fury, fixated on the property marker near the oak tree. No. No, no, and no. That marker is new. She moved it. She's tampering with evidence. Officer Miller sighed, a long, exasperated sound. Ms. Thorne, we are not seeing any evidence of tampering. These markers are typically set during the initial survey and are quite difficult to move without specialized equipment, which would leave clear signs of disturbance. But I saw her. I saw her digging there. Janice insisted, her voice rising again, bordering on hysteria. She looked wildly at the neighbors, as if seeking validation, but their faces offered only a mixture of embarrassment and pity. Officer Davis, sensing the situation was rapidly devolving, stepped forward. Ms. Thorne, if you genuinely believe there's a discrepancy in the official county records, your recourse is not to accuse your neighbor of theft, nor to call the police for a civil matter. You need to consult with your own surveyor and, if necessary, an attorney to re-examine the property lines. This is N. The days following the police visit were steeped in an eerie quiet that felt more menacing than any shouting match. Sarah found herself constantly on edge, her gaze unconsciously drawn to Janice's house. The pink visor was conspicuously absent, the porch swing empty. It was the calm before the storm, she was certain. She still planted her petunias, defiantly, placing each delicate bloom with a silent vow to protect her territory. The sense of peace she had once associated with her yard was now replaced by a quiet vigilance. Her phone buzzed one afternoon while she was watering the struggling hydrangeas near the disputed fence line. It was an unknown number. Hesitantly, she answered. Miss Thompson. A clipped, formal voice inquired. My name is Arthur Jenkins. I'm an attorney representing Ms. Janice Thorne. Sarah's heart leaped into her throat. Yes, Mr. Jenkins? Her voice was steady, betraying none of the sudden anxiety that coiled in her stomach. Ms. Thorne has retained my services regarding an ongoing property dispute between your two residences, Jenkins continued, his voice devoid of warmth. She alleges that a portion of her historical property has been unlawfully annexed by your residence, and that the existing fence line is incorrect. Mr. Jenkins, Sarah interrupted, a new surge of resolve hardening her tone. I have the deed, the plat map, and a recent survey, all of which confirm the current fence line is precisely on my property boundary. The police have already reviewed these documents. Yes, we are aware of that, Miss Thompson, Jenkins replied, a hint of something that sounded like patronization in his voice. However, Ms. Thorne maintains that these documents are either flawed, or that there has been a historical error that needs rectification. She believes the original survey markers were moved, or that an older, more accurate survey exists that predates your current documentation. Sarah scoffed. A historical error? What are you suggesting, that I deliberately moved a property marker to gain a few feet of grass? Ms. Thompson, I am simply relaying my client's position, Jenkins said smoothly. My client is prepared to pursue this matter through legal channels if necessary. As a first step, she intends to commission her own independent survey. We will then, based on those findings, seek to have the property line officially re-established to reflect what Ms. Thorne believes to be the true boundary. And what if her survey confirms my documents? Sarah challenged. A beat of silence. Then we will, of course, re-evaluate our position, Jenkins conceded, but the tone implied this was a highly unlikely scenario. However, should it show a discrepancy, Ms. Thorne expects you to cooperate fully in rectifying the error, including removing the offending portion of your fence and allowing a new one to be erected on the correct line. And if I don't? Sarah asked, her grip tightening on the phone. Then, Ms. Thompson, we will have no choice but to file a lawsuit to quiet title and compel compliance, Jenkins stated, the threat hanging heavy in the air. I urge you to consider the costs and stress of protracted litigation. Perhaps it would be prudent to simply yield a few feet now, rather than incur significant legal fees later. I have not yielded anything, Mr. Jenkins, because this is my property, Sarah shot back, her blood beginning to boil. I will not be bullied into giving up what is legally mine. Have Ms. Thorne conduct her survey. I will be happy to compare the results with my own. And I will certainly be retaining my own attorney. As you wish, Miss Thompson, Jenkins said, his voice now devoid of any pretense of politeness. Consider this an official notice. You will be hearing from us again. Good day. He hung up, leaving Sarah standing amidst her hydrangeas, the dial tone buzzing in her ear like a swarm of angry bees. Her hands trembled slightly as she lowered the phone. A lawsuit. Janice wasn't just blowing smoke. She was genuinely going to drag Sarah through the legal system over a strip of lawn. The living hell, she promised, was beginning. The next few weeks were a blur of nervous energy. Sarah contacted a local real estate attorney, David Chen, a calm, pragmatic man who listened patiently to her account, nodding occasionally as she recounted Janice's histrionics. He reviewed her deed and survey, confirming their validity. Your documents are solid, Sarah, Chen assured her, leaning back in his leather chair. This often happens with older properties where original markers might degrade or get overgrown, and neighbors develop an understanding of where they think the line is, sometimes inaccurately. When a new owner comes in with fresh paperwork, it can upset that perception. So, what happens now? Sarah asked, clutching her purse. Now we wait for Ms. Thorne's survey, Chen explained. If her surveyor finds the same boundary as yours, this should end. The industrial fan whirred like a caged beast, its incessant drone clawing at Sarah's nerves. It was a physical manifestation of Janice's malice, a deliberate assault on her peace. Sarah stood on her lawn, hands clenched, watching the absurd spectacle. Janice, still lingering by her back door, offered a saccharine smile that didn't reach her cold, triumphant eyes. Some people, Janice called out, her voice barely audible over the fan, just need a little reminder of who's been here longer, dearie. Newcomers tend to forget their place. Sarah said nothing. Her immediate instinct was to march over there, yank the plug, and hurl the monstrosity into Janice's rose bushes. But a deeper, colder part of her recognized that was exactly what Janice wanted, a public meltdown, another accusation of irrational behavior. She took a deep breath, the metallic tang of rage coating her tongue. This wasn't a spontaneous outburst. This was calculated, prolonged harassment. She went inside, the fan's hum still audible, a phantom vibration in her teeth. The first thing she did was call David Chen. He listened, a long pause on the other end after she described the fan. An industrial fan, pointed at your property, near your bedroom window. Chen repeated, a note of disbelief in his voice. That's certainly a creative approach to harassment. And borderline actionable, depending on local ordinances. Borderline? David, I can't think straight in my own home. Sarah exclaimed, pacing her living room. I understand, Sarah. It's designed to be deeply irritating, Chen said. Here's what we do. First, document everything. Take photos, record the noise level with an app if you can, note the times it's running. This builds a case for nuisance or harassment. Second, check your local city or county ordinances for noise levels, especially during certain hours, and restrictions on industrial equipment in residential zones. I can also look into that for you. Third, we need to send her attorney, Mr. Jenkins, a cease and desist letter. That'll be our official first step. Sarah spent the rest of the day meticulously documenting the fan. She took videos, showing its placement, the direction it was blowing, and the apparent lack of anything on Janice's property that legitimately needed such intense airflow. She downloaded a decibel meter app and grimly recorded the noise, watching the numbers climb far beyond comfortable levels. Even with her windows closed, the fan permeated her sanctuary, a constant reminder of Janice's presence. The next morning, the fan was still there, still whirring. Sarah, coffee in hand, stepped out onto her porch, hoping for a moment of peace before work. Janice was already out, perched on her own porch swing, sipping tea, a picture of serene enjoyment. Their eyes met. Janice raised her teacup in a mock toast, a smirk playing on her lips. Sarah felt a renewed surge of fury. She called the city's non-emergency line, explaining the situation. "An industrial fan pointed at my house?" "Yes, ma'am, that's unusual," the dispatcher said, sounding vaguely amused. "I can send an officer to assess the situation for a possible noise violation." Another police car. Another spectacle. Officer Davis, thankfully, was one of the officers who had responded to the initial property dispute. Her expression, when she saw the behemoth fan, shifted from professional neutrality to a faint, visible exasperation. "Ms. Thorne," Officer Davis said, approaching Janice, who had risen from her swing, ready to launch into another tirade. "We're here regarding a complaint about this fan. It's quite loud." "Loud?" Janice scoffed, her voice feigning innocence. "It's just a little fan, officer. Helping with my prize-winning roses. They need excellent air circulation, you know. Keeps the mildew away." She gestured vaguely towards a patch of bushes far from the fan's direct path. Officer Davis walked over to the fence, measuring the distance from the fan to Sarah's house, then looked at the decibel app Sarah had on her phone, which was clearly displaying a reading well above the residential limit. "Ms. Thorne, this fan is directly pointed at your neighbor's property and is generating noise levels that exceed the city's residential ordinance. It also appears to be industrial equipment, which is restricted in residential areas unless actively used for construction with proper permits." Janice's face hardened. "It's on my property, officer. I can put whatever I want on my property. While it is on your property, its impact is affecting your neighbor's property, creating a nuisance," Officer Davis explained patiently, though her tone was firm. "And the type of equipment itself is a violation. You need to turn it off and remove it, Miss Thorne." "I most certainly will not," Janice declared, drawing herself up to her full, imposing height. "This is harassment. She's trying to stop me from caring for my roses. She's the one who started all of." Janice Thorne stood rooted to her lawn, the clipboard clutched in her trembling hand. Her face, a mask of disbelief, was a canvas of rapidly shifting emotions. Shock, then anger, followed by a dawning, terrible realization. The grizzled surveyor, still patiently explaining the finer points of the plat, might as well have been speaking in a foreign language. He pointed again, emphatically, to the faint line marked on the ground by a temporary stake, a line that perfectly mirrored Sarah's existing fence. The oak tree, the supposed prize of her ancestral claim, was undeniably on Sarah's side. But that's impossible," Janice finally spluttered, her voice a reedy whisper, completely devoid of its usual bombast. "My mother always said, 4 generations, that tree was ours. This survey must be wrong. You've made a mistake." The surveyor, a man accustomed to such reactions, merely shook his head. "Ms. Thorne, we've triple-checked our readings. We used all available historical county records, consulted previous plat maps, and applied modern GPS and laser technology. The boundary is precisely as indicated on this report, and as confirmed by Ms. Thompson's current deed, which we cross-referenced." He handed her a copy of his findings, a stark, factual counterpoint to her long-held conviction. Janice snatched the report, her eyes darting over the technical jargon, as if hoping to find a hidden loophole, a single error that would invalidate everything. There was none. The truth, stark and irrefutable, was laid bare. Not only was Sarah's fence on her own property, but Janice's property line actually ended a few inches further away from the oak tree than the existing fence, meaning that if anything, Sarah had been generous by not moving the fence even closer to Janice's house. The karmic irony was almost too much to bear, Sarah watched from her window, a complex mix of emotions churning within her. Relief was paramount, a deep, cleansing wave. But it was tempered by a strange sense of pity for Janice, a woman so utterly consumed by her own delusion. The humiliation Janice was experiencing, public and undeniable, was palpable even from a distance. Janice finally looked up from the report, her eyes scanning the street. The neighbors, sensing the dramatic conclusion, were once again peeking from behind curtains or pretending to water plants, their ears straining. Janice's gaze settled on Sarah's window, a flicker of raw, incandescent hatred passing through her eyes before she quickly averted them, a flush of shame creeping up her neck. Her pink visor seemed to droop. With a frustrated, almost guttural sound, she turned and marched into her house, slamming the door shut with a resounding thud that echoed through the sudden, absolute silence of the street. Sarah felt a smile touch her lips, genuine and unforced for the first time in weeks. She immediately called David Chun. "The survey's done," she announced, trying to keep the triumph out of her voice. "And it confirmed everything. My deed, my survey, all correct." "Excellent news, Sarah." Chen's voice was genuinely pleased. "I had a feeling that would be the case. I'll await the official report from Mr. Jenkins, but this effectively resolves the factual dispute over the property line. He won't have a leg to stand on for a quiet title action now." "So, it's over?" Sarah asked, a hopeful tremor in her voice. Chen paused. "The legal dispute over the boundary, yes, that should be. However, knowing your neighbor, the personal dispute might still have a few chapters left. I'll send a formal letter to Mr. Jenkins summarizing the surveyor's findings and reiterating that we consider this matter closed, and any further frivolous legal action will be met with a request for legal fees." Over the next few days, the silence from Janice's house was absolute. No industrial fan, no accidental sprinklers, no taunting remarks. Her curtains remained drawn, her porch swing empty. It was as if she had retreated into a bunker of shame and fury. Sarah began to breathe easier, allowing herself to enjoy her meticulously tended lawn once more. The petunias, now vibrant and blooming, seemed to nod in approval. Then came the letter from David Chun. Not a letter to Jenkins, but a letter from Jenkins. It was brief, concise, and almost brutally formal. It acknowledged receipt of Janice Thorne's independent survey, confirmed its findings aligning with Sarah Thompson's documentation, and stated, without apology or pleasantries, that Ms. Thorne had decided not to pursue legal action regarding the property line dispute. The wording was cold, official, and a resounding confirmation of Sarah's victory. Sarah reread the letter, a surge of pure satisfaction washing over her. It was done. Officially, legally, undeniably. Janice had been forced to concede. But the real, gut-wrenching shock came a week later. Sarah was enjoying a rare, truly peaceful morning coffee on her back patio, the sun wore.